The Joe Biden recession begins. We're in quarter two. We're in quarter three, but we've got numbers now. And the numbers don't look all that good. But the White House is trying to have it sort of both ways. They're looking back and they're saying, many of these economic metrics are irrelevant. We don't like those anymore. We like what we want to use today to further our narrative. And you can see there's a lot to unpack. We've got our first sort of baseline that we need to set. So when we ask these questions, one of the things we can do here is really dive into the weeds, and we can say, well, what happens with all of the complicated numbers and how do we assemble them? And then you can debate over the numbers, right? You can debate the technicalities on these things. So for example, what the White House is going to say is they're going to refer us over to this organization called the nber.org, the National Bureau of Economic Research. And here it tells us this is the business cycle dating chart, right? And so basically what they're doing is they're going to tell us that they define a recession according to this sentence here. A recession is the period between a peak of economic activity and its subsequent trough, or the lowest point, right? So sort of on this wave between the high point, the peak economic activity, and its subsequent trough, the low point. Between the trough and the peak, the economy is in an expansion. Expansion is the normal state of the economy, and most recessions are brief. Okay, so they sort of tell you here. Now, it is also something where there's a lot of different factors. It's not confined to one sector. The committee emphasizes wide measures of economic activity and so on, right? So it's a very complicated sort of analysis that takes place. And we don't need to bore ourselves with this. You can even ask yourselves, is that 2-quarter metric reasonable? Doesn't matter. The point is, we can just listen to what they have to say about it, their own people, right? So here you go. Tom Elliott posted this over on Twitter this afternoon. He said, good news, quote, recession now means strong economy. And this is the supercut. And this is the one that, sort of he assembled or somebody assembled. It's 2 minutes. We'll just take a quick look at what this says. Here it is.
All signs are that this is a strong economy, and the probability of a recession within the next year is not particularly elevated.
It's a strong economy, and nothing about it suggests that it's close to or vulnerable to a recession.
I don't expect a recession.
No one is predicting a recession now.
We are not expecting that we are already in a recession. In fact, the guts and the bones of this economy remain strong.
These are not the marks of an economy in recession.
Right now, we don't see a recession. Right now, we're not in a recession right now.
This is not an economy that's in recession.
Not only is a recession not inevitable, but I think that a lot of people are underestimating those strengths and the resilience of the American economy.
We have a strong labor market, which you don't normally see in a recession.
Okay, so you see what's happening here, right? They're saying it's sort of, they're prognosticating there's not going to be a recession, and they're jumping into those variables that we just looked at from the NEBR that is sort of hinting that, maybe it's not about only the GDP numbers. There's also some other things that might go into it.
Recession is broad-based weakness in the economy. We're not seeing that now.
In your view, is a recession in the United States inevitable?
No.
Typically, economists date a recession as being at least 2 quarters of negative growth and other factors, which we have not seen at all.
Wait a minute. So that was her standard, right? So who is this woman?
And other factors, which we have not seen at all.
The idea that 2 quarters of negative GDP growth is a technical definition of a recession is wrong.
A common definition of recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP growth.
Wait. So here you've got this Jared Bernstein. We're going to hear from him in a minute. He says that 2 quarters of negative economic growth is a technical definition, but not a good one. And then you have the Treasury Secretary who comes out and says that it is a good definition. So I'm confused. These people are way smarter than I am on these. He's an economic advisor and he's on TV. What is this? I don't even know what he's on. But it's got a Chiron and it's got, CNBC. They've got stock market numbers on there. I mean, now obviously there's numbers on there with pluses and minus signs and reds and greens. So obviously they know what they're talking about. Let's listen to him.
The idea that 2 quarters of negative GDP growth is a technical definition of a recession is wrong.
A common definition.
Okay, so he says it's wrong, but this is Janet Yellen. She's the Treasury Secretary. She's smarter than he is for sure. So let's listen to her.
Definition of recession is 2 negative.
Wait, hold on. Let's make sure we hear it.
Is wrong.
A common definition of recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP growth.
2 quarters of negative growth in a row, that's a recession. Right, and certainly in terms
Right.
of the technical definition, it's not a recession. The technical definition considers a much broader spectrum of data points.
What is exactly the White House's definition of a recession?
Again, I'm not going to define it from here.
How worried should Americans be that we could be in a recession?
We're not going to be in a recession.
Nobody, including especially the White House and especially Joe Biden, is going to sugarcoat any of this.
Well, I'm not concerned about a recession. And I mean, you're always concerned about a recession.
All right. So that is the president. Now, so it's kind of complicated, I suppose. So one way to interpret it is that 2 quarters of, declining GDP is a recession because you sort of have a downward trend, right? Things aren't looking all that good. And they're saying, Janet Yellen says, it is kind of a recession but kind of not. So it's a weird thing. It's complicated. I don't know. This is a reality, according to some people who I think are more, sort of boots in the ground on this. I typically check out Zero Hedge, and they posted this morning, 5:40 a.m. They say, all right, look at this. Here's the numbers. We're looking like a recession big time. Considering the dismal Atlanta Fed GDP now prints in recent weeks, and considering the full court press, hardly going to be a surprise. But in any case, moments ago, the Bureau of Economic Analysis confirmed what everyone has long known, and that is that the Biden economy is now in a technical recession. The first estimate of Q2 GDP came in at 0.9%, down. Still the second consecutive quarter of declining GDP as far as the markets are concerned. As far as the markets are concerned, they write that is the definition of a recession. And so they show you there, right, 2 negative quarters. You see that big quarter down, right? That was 2020. So that was quarter 2, 2020, which was COVID. Pandemonium, and people are digging in with Joe Biden saying, I helped to pull this country out of a recession before, and as president, I'll do it again. And it's going, those numbers don't look so good. And you take a look, at sort of how this breaks down. Inventory's down, real GDP percent change is down, obviously. Exports are up, consumer spending is up, but everything else is down across the board. All right, so we get the gist of that. Now, the reaction once all of this hit really kind of hit the fan today as Doocy over from Fox News got into it with KJP. And here is what the first little bit of this sounded like. I've got 4 clips of this, and here is this was today, I believe.
If things are going so great, though, then why is it the White House officials are trying to redefine recession?
No, we're not redefining recession.
If we all understand a recession to be 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth in a row, and then you have White House officials come up here to say, no, that's not what a recession is. It's something else. How is that not redefining recession?
Because that's not the definition.
Because that's not the definition. Okay, so we're fighting over definitions again, and I'm not an economist or a biologist, and so, some things are better left to the experts, I suppose. But now, right, this is how she responds to Doocy. She says specifically, Biden is the one responsible for saving the economy, not for destroying the economy. He turned the economy on, which is a little bit of an interesting new talking point that we have from them.
So as you talk about plans on the other side, it was this president's plans that contributed to inflation, right?
No, it was not. It was this president's plan. If we talk about the American Rescue Plan, look, Peter, when the president walked into this administration, there was an economic crisis. There was a COVID crisis. There was a climate change crisis.
We don't watch a lot of KJP on here for this reason. It's really kind of difficult. She's kind of condescending to Peter. Look, Peter. She's like, hey, look, stupid. And he watch his facial expression. He kind of goes, oh, gosh.
President's plans that contributed to inflation, right?
No, it was not. It was this president's plan. If we talk about the American Rescue Plan, look, Peter, when the president walked into this administration, there was an economic crisis. There was a COVID crisis. There was a climate change crisis. And we're still dealing with a lot of that right now. But the president turned the economy back on. There were businesses that were closed, schools that were closed. And because of the American Rescue Plan, by the way, no Republican voted for that plan. And that plan had $350 billion for public safety, another thing that Republicans talk about, but they actually don't do.
Yikes.
And they don't push forward on a policy.
Okay, so real quick. So she just pivoted from this issue. She said, Republicans didn't support our plan, by the way, for law enforcement. And you go, well, hold on a minute. You ran on defund the police. What are you talking about? That's number one. Number two, she said we also spent $250 billion. So you go, yeah, the American Rescue Plan, right? That was a big bloated federal stimulus that was just spending money all over the place. So that's what people are pointing to say Joe Biden came in and the budget just got ballooned through the roof. So the response here that, look, we're not responsible for this. We spent $250 billion is like, well, that's what we're mad about. You spent too much money and now there's inflation everywhere.
Policy that will help our law enforcement. That plan helped put us in a stronger labor market and help make our economy stronger. And so that is what is happening.
That's responsible for the recession, the declining GDP.
It is not the president that has created inflation. There are also outside factors that has led us to where we are today.
All right. So it's a strange thing. It's very weird. Now, Doocy just kept going. And so I've got two more clips from him. And he asked specifically, actually, let me play this clip first. Okay. The RNC came out and they posted this. Now, people are just having fun with definitions because, you're sort of making people eat their own words. And to be honest, I don't know how else you deal with this if you are the Biden administration. Like, it is a burning building everywhere you look and everything they touch just turns to garbage. And so they're in a precarious position. What do? They have to pick one number that looks good and then they, run with that. And you can't blame them. That's what politicians do. So here is now the compare and contrast version from this guy, Brian Deese. And we've got a clip from 2008 and then Brian Deese yesterday, I believe is when this was.
2 negative quarters of GDP growth is not the technical definition of recession. It's not the definition that economists have traditionally relied on.
Okay. But Brian Deese in 2008 wrote, this is Brian. What Senator Clinton has said is that, of course, economists have a technical definition of recession, which is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. And what she's been more focused on is how the economy is impacting typical families. Okay, so you sort of highlight that compare and contrast there. So his the language changes to suit them. And, it's not a big surprise. It's politics. But here is Doocy making them eat their words a little bit.
That is not the definition.
Brian Deese said in 2008, of course, economists have a technical definition, which is of a recession, which is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth.
I can tell you this.
Yesterday he said 2 negative quarters of GDP growth is not the technical definition of a recession.
It is
What
not.
changed?
It is not.
Why did he say that it was?
It is not.
Why did he say that it was then in 2008? And it sounds like maybe the only real distinction here is that it's 2 different presidents.
I can speak to what he said yesterday in front of all of you, which is the last thing that you just repeated. There are many factors, economic factors and indicators to consider, and I will say that the textbook definition of recession is not 2 negative quarters of GDP. We have a strong labor market. We have business that's investing.
Does anybody have an economics textbook out there? I'm just curious, like if you've got an 8th grader or something, do they have economics in 8th grade? I don't even remember. I don't remember a lot of those years, but whenever it is, like open it up. What does it say in there? It'd be funny if somebody did that. They say, hey, here in my school, this is what they're teaching, because it could actually be in a textbook. I bet you could find a textbook that has the definition in there that says 2 negative quarters. Somebody should send that to KJP.
We have consumers that are also very much, in investing and purchasing. That is incredibly important. We have 3.6 unemployment. You do not see that in a pre-recession, and you do not see that in a recession. So the factors that we are seeing right now, the economic indicators, does not show that we're in a recession. And I'll read, since you gave me some quotes, I'll give you some as well.
Okay.
In 2009, the St. Louis Fed said, while the popular definition of recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative real gross domestic product GDP growth, the NBER, which we have mentioned many times in this room, does not strictly abide by this designation. Instead, the committee broadly defines a recession as a significant decline in economic activity spreading across the economy, lasting more than a few months. NBER has been around since
Wait a minute, lasting more than a few months? That sounds like 2 quarters. What? She just said economic downturns that last more than a few months. That's like, 6 months would be 2 quarters, right? Am I doing the math? Yeah, I mean, it's 3 plus 3, 6, I think. Hopefully I got that right. Goodness, that would be very embarrassing. Might get a job in the Biden administration. All right, so here's KJP.
20. I'm going to move on.
Moving on. All right. Well, not very useful there, because I think that even according to the NBER definition, that it might actually constitute a recession. Now, it also sounds like this one is sort of backwards looking, right? They sort of wait for the numbers and then they go back and they define, oh yeah, this period was a recession, right? The down period from the highlight and the trough all the way down, recession, because you're losing economic growth. And all right, well, so that's what we've got. Now, they're going to be fighting over the definitions for a long period of time. There are many other people who are almost like kind of happy about this. We saw this morning. KJP joined The View. She's on here for 2 minutes and 17 seconds, really unpacking these economic numbers to sort of break the bad news and paper over a lot of this. And here's what she had to say.
The economy is on all Americans' minds. Families are paying more at the grocery store, feeling the pain at the pump.
Inflation,
and a new report out this morning
prices
shows that the economy shrank for a second straight quarter, and some say we are officially in a recession. Yet President Biden has said we are on the right path. A lot of Americans don't feel that way. So is there a disconnect here, and is it going to get worse?
So let me just first say, and I want to make sure that I say this to Americans who are watching, your audience, your viewers. The president understands the anxiety that people feel about the economy, about inflation, the cost that they're seeing around them. That's why he has put forward a plan to really attack inflation and bring those costs down. Let me speak to the numbers that you just mentioned, that GDP number that you just mentioned. So if you look at prior recession, what happens before a recession in U.S. history, you see jobs lost. And that's not what we're seeing right now. Right now, we're seeing gains, 2.7 million.
All right. Well, I think that might actually be forward, optimism from these people. Now, hang on one second. I thought I had a link pulled up here that I liked, and somebody actually shared this over on our community, so I'm sort of pulling this up in real time. 1 hour ago. All right, yeah, so this was just a quick assembly now. Zach Nichols shared this over on our locals community. He says, this post posted on LinkedIn, layoffs latest, companies making cuts, updated 1 hour ago from an editor at LinkedIn News. Announcements of layoffs, hiring freezes, and rescinded job offers had roiled the tech industry for several months. All manner of adverse effects are happening right now. Wall Street Journal announcing a job loss on social media, reason twofold. And a list goes on and on. Vox, 39 employees. Shopify is laying off 1,000. New York City Envision also talked about layoffs. Wearable tech maker Whoop is dropping 15% of 630 people. 7-Eleven laid off 880 corporate employees. Lunchbox, 33% of its employees. Ford is cutting 8,000 jobs, right? LinkedIn members have posted about all of these other companies, and the list goes on and on. Genetic firm Invitae, 1,000 employees. Vimeo. Okay. Online mortgage banker. Look at this list. Look, it just keeps going and going and going and going and going. All from Jeremy Ragnar. So great link, great share. Thank you for that, Zach. But my point in sharing that is that, they're talking about these optimistic job numbers because they were quite good for a while. But the job losses are in quarter 3. Okay, they all are happening like now in July. They weren't happening in June. So their talking point is based on, good numbers, but they're not continuing to be good.
Jobs created in the first 6 months, 1.2 million jobs created in the last quarter, 3.6% unemployment. That matters. And when you look at it more broadly at the data, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing is that we are in a transition. We had this strong economic growth because of the work that this president has done in the past 18 months. And now what we're seeing is a transition into stable and steady growth. But we get it. We get that people are still feeling a little bit more pain. And so what you're going to hear from the president in the 12 o'clock hour, I hope your audience listens in and your viewers listen in. He's going to talk about how Congress is acting on this piece of legislation called the Inflation Reduction Act.
All right, so the Inflation Reduction Act, that's going to be the new thing that they try to cram down everybody's throat. And we talked a little bit about that on our morning walk and talk today, but I'm not going to really unpack that because it is going to very likely pass. I think it may have already passed today, but it's going to be one of those magical spending bills where they spend money, raise taxes to generate revenue that they'll spend, and it's going to reduce inflation. So these people are just so like illiterate, it's unbelievable. But speaking of that, we have this Jared Bernstein again, one of Biden's economic advisors. Then we'll wrap it up with Joe Biden himself. Here is Bernstein. Bernstein.
I mean, it's been very clear. The president, your whole team has been pushing back aggressively on if the country is in a recession and how worried the country should be about entering a recession in light of this. The New York Times put it this way today. To paraphrase an old political adage, if you're explaining how recession calls are made, you're losing. Do you see that, Jared?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
No.
I think we've gotten into a technical discussion about what constitutes a recession. And I think, look, bringing the facts to the table is something that we as economic advisors have to do.
Oh, no, we're splitting hairs. He said, she said. I mean, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, 4 quarters, whatever. Stop beating us up about it. Here's Joe Biden, right? He came out for 1 minute, took no questions, and hightailed it as usual.
And just last week, as I said, SK Corporation of the Republic of Korea announced $22 billion in new investment in semiconductor batteries, chargers, and medical devices, creating another 16,000 jobs here in America. And this is powering the strongest rebound in American manufacturing in over 3 decades, creating 613,000 manufacturing jobs. Passing the CHIPS bill is going to put another $72 billion for incentives and tax credits to expand semiconductor production. And the Inflation Reduction Act will add another $370 billion in clean energy tax credits in reconciliation, including incentives to accelerate domestic production of solar panels, wind turbines, batteries, and critical materials processing. That doesn't sound like a recession to me. Thank you very much.
It doesn't sound like a recession to me. He just walks out of there. That doesn't sound like a recession to me, folks. I'll be in my nap room. Okay, well, there's the president. So I guess the numbers are, I must not be, we got a lot of scolding for not following the science. We're trying to follow the economics, but maybe we're not following the economics. Maybe somebody should lecture us about those too. That's Joe Biden. That is the Biden recession fully underway. And I don't take glee with this stuff. A lot of people are sort of, I think they take glee. Oh, good. We're going into recession. Joe Biden's an idiot. And I don't particularly do that. There's going to be a lot of people that are hurt from these policies. And I think a lot about it. I've got a whole team of people that I wake up thinking about and about how this is going to impact, us and them and their lives and our clients and their lives and you and your lives. And it's a lot. But I think what you might be sensing from some people in this story is that all of this felt and feels very foreseeable. All of this was sort of prognosticated. I was screaming about this with many of you here on this channel when there was like 3,000 subscribers on this channel back in March of 2020, all talking about, the bills are going to be due at some point. And it looks like, the consequences are finally catching up with people. So it is a disappointing day to sort of see it now happening and like becoming official. But the deluded people in charge are still just going to keep moving forward, keep spending money, keep raising taxes. And I guess the economic catastrophe will continue to steamroll ahead and will be the ones who suffer the consequences.